Hey, is this thing on? Hello? Hit it again. I think it's on now. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio, where each week, Doc will drag some colorful characters out of the woods to talk trail and Type 2 fun. If you're aspiring hiker trash, or if you're just looking to understand the hiker trash in your life, look no further. So lace up those boots, gnaw on some jerky, and settle into your 20-mile pace as we fire up the podcast from somewhere deep in the backcountry. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail, dirtbags, hiker trash, and of course, good smelling day hikers. I'm Doc, and this is Hiker Trash Radio. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, help us out. Take just a minute, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you don't like what we're doing, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest. Now, if you are a regular listener to the podcast, you've heard me say that the outdoor adventure tree has many branches, and we have talked to all kinds of people doing all kinds of stuff out there. We've talked to thru hikers, big wall climbers, squirrel suit flyers, Barkley competitors, adventure racers, kayakers, and a whole bunch more. This week, we are talking to our first backcountry mountain biker. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio, endurance athlete and world champion, Kait Boyle. How's it going, Kait?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going great. And wow, just that list of adventure people is very impressive. Squirrel suit, that stuck with me.
Everybody's got a story, and sometimes the story takes place in the outdoors where they're having these adventures, and sometimes the story is the person and how that person got to that point. It's all very fascinating, and I love talking to the wide variety of folks we have on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm psyched to chat.
Absolutely. Now, you seem to be set up in an interesting room. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you might want to check it out. Can you let us know where you're calling in from?
Yeah, to my right is my dresser, and to the left are my husband's clothes. And so I'm sitting in our closet because we live in a one-room studio, and it's currently the evening, and so he's home from work. We're dog sitting, and we have a dog, so there's a lot going on in the one room that there is. So I'm in the micro room.
Nice. Thank you for calling in from the closet. That's awesome. Now, typically on Hiker Trash Radio, we typically go by trail names, and that is that unique American long trail tradition of assigning a name, a nickname to somebody out there based on maybe something that happens on the trail. Maybe it's a peculiar personality trait. Maybe it's based on where you're from. Any such tradition in the backcountry mountain biking community?
There isn't that I know of. So in the more like bike pack style racing, where track leaders uses spot GPS devices to track us online, we get these little bubbles with our initials. And so I think the closest thing would be like the KB dot, or some Lael Wilcox would be the LW dot, and Hefe just recently was the JB dot. I think maybe that's how we think of each other, but we don't have quite the creative and long-lasting tradition that you all have.
Got it. So is it okay to refer to you as KB, or do I have to include the dot in there as well?
We can go with KB. Yeah.
And do you know Lael Wilcox?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, she was on the podcast in its previous
nice.
iteration when we were the John Fricke Muir Pod. She came on, told a lot of great stories. Really impressive athlete.
Totally. Yeah. We've had some good times racing each other, riding together, that sort of thing. So
my mom, herefore known as Doc's mom on the podcast, my mom, after listening to that episode, she tried to get in touch with Reese Witherspoon with her production company to try and get. My mom has no Hollywood connections, but she thought she would just cry because after listening to that episode, she said, this is a movie that needs to happen, and Reese Witherspoon could play her.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, so good. Reese Witherspoon will just play all the endurance activity people.
That's right. That's right. Now, to my knowledge, she never got a response, but okay.
Well, greasy, squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's what they say.
That's right. All right. KB, have you listened to the podcast before?
I haven't. I'm excited to now go back and listen to the squirrel suit person, big wall climber, and probably go from there. Kayaking. Yeah. Sounds awesome.
I love it when I have guests on the podcast who have not listened to it. You don't know what you're getting into. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I try to do this with podcasts where I like to go back and start to follow the show afterwards, but I want this to be a full new experience for me. And so far, I'm very excited because I already feel like I'm in the Sierra just looking at you.
A fresh take, fresh perspective. Here we go. All right. Hey, I only asked if you listen to the podcast because I want to make sure that you know about a segment we have towards the end of the episode called the hiking hack. And that's where you will have a chance. It's not really hiking hack in your case. It's called hiking hack. But in your case, if you could impart some outdoor adventure wisdom to our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better.
Okay. Absolutely.
Right? Don't give it up too early. If you have something in mind and you speak it halfway into the episode, you're still going to be on the hook at the end.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right.
Trailblazers Toolkit.
That's right. It's time for the Trailblazers Toolkit, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company 6 Moon Designs. Now, KB, I love to talk about gear on the podcast, and I love to hear about the most important item in my guest adventure gear. So if you're preparing for your next adventure, and I was the one providing you with all your gear, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? Make sure to give me all the specifics on that piece of gear and tell me why you've got to have it out there. And this can be any type of gear, any type of item. It could be gear, apparel, luxury item. Kate, what is that item in your toolkit?
Okay, so super basic. The one thing so as cyclists, we wear helmets, at least the smart ones do. But I always bring a ball cap because I think that a good trip involves getting off your bike and sitting in a beautiful place to have lunch, take a nap, go swimming. And as someone who is also fair-skinned, I burn easily. And so that's not a normal thing to bring bike packing, but I do always bring a visor type hat, trucker hat on multi-day trips. But then the thing that comes to mind is actually that's most important is a sleeping bag that's warm enough. And I think probably similar to through hiking, bike packers think a lot about weight in their kit, and on a bike where you can fit things like a sleeping bag is one of the more bulky items, and it's an easy place to cut corners as far as getting your kit down smaller and tighter and lighter, which is super valuable. But I think that we also we need to have good sleep in order to recover well and to be happy the next day. And so having a sleeping bag that's actually warm enough for the conditions that I'm riding in would be the thing that I prioritize the most. And so the two that I do a lot in the winter too. So I have a fleet of sleeping bags. The summer ones that are my favorites, I have at this point a kind of old Western Mountaineering 35-degree bag, and I don't even remember the model. Sorry, not sponsored by them. It's okay. It's purple. It's great.
The purple bag. Got it.
The purple. Yeah, it's probably still purple knowing them. So the purple one, plum, really. And then Patagonia also makes a more like a 30-degree that feels warmer. It's a little bigger, but it's actually pairs really well with a down jacket. And then that gets me through the more slightly below freezing temperatures.
Got it.
Those are the two I bring to packing.
Good choices. Now, you mentioned the importance of that helmet. Have you ever been in an accident where you have really needed that helmet?
Yeah, I think I've luckily, knock on wood, not had any traumatic brain injuries or concussions from biking. I've definitely hit my head though. And I've had little dents on my helmet and just those moments where you're like, oh wow, that was intense. Nothing serious. Thank goodness.
Better to have the dents on the helmet than on your head.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it makes wearing a hat more difficult.
Yeah, totally. The hat's for when not riding.
Got it.
It's the hiking pole.
All right, it's time for the hiking pole, and that is pole with 2 L's, not like the things that hikers carry in their hands. This is a survey, a 7-question survey that's going to help me give you a score on the sanity scale from 1 to 100. With one being completely insane and 100 being completely sane. Now, I have a set of questions here, 7 questions that are related to hiking. Do you have much hiking experience, KB?
I do. Yes.
Okay. So you feel comfortable weighing in on these questions here?
Yeah, sure. I, for a long time, worked for Knowles and Prescott College in Outward Bound teaching backpacking.
Okay.
So I haven't done any like much personal, really long trips, but yeah, a lot of walking in my life.
Now, so when I talk to the squirrel suit flyers and the other folks that don't do a lot of hiking, I do have a second set of questions that wrestle with some of our big questions in society today. So I always have those in reserve, but knowing that you are a former backpacker, enjoy hiking, I'll ask you the questions from the first set.
Okay.
All right. So if we were to open up the closet and call out to your husband, we're not going to, but if we were, call out to him and ask him where he would score you on the sanity scale. You think he'd give you a low score or a high score?
Does a high score make you sane or insane?
High score, the higher the score, the saner you are.
Okay. He likes to say I'm a critical thinker, that I think would contribute to the sanity, but I think that he thinks my general approach to movement and being outside is more on the insane score.
Okay. Is he also a biker?
Yeah, so I would give him a more insane score because he is a whitewater kayaker. Like, he paddles class 5 rivers, which is incredibly more dangerous and insane than mountain biking, in my opinion. So, but yeah, I think it's more the like endurance, having a history of riding all night without sleeping, not wearing a chamois, not carrying very much, that sort of thing.
Got it. Both sports require helmets. Both sports require helmets.
That's true. Yes.
But if your bike goes upside down, you just get back up again. But a kayak, that freaks me out a little bit. Being underwater in some kind of rapid situation where it's tough to flip the boat back over, that's a little scary.
That's exactly why I don't. And it also, mountain biking, you can stop your bike and get off it.
That's right. The road is not moving. The road is not moving you down the hill.
Exactly. Kayaks, you're in a moving river.
Got it.
It's not stopping.
All right. So you would give him a score on the lower side.
Yeah, I think we probably would give each other an equal score. And it's hard to, having not listened to what other people's scores are, I don't know, maybe around the 2 or 3.
Okay. Now, you should know, anybody that has participated in the 24 hours of Old Pueblo, that's an automatic 25-point deduction. So your highest possible score is 75. Sorry.
Okay.
Reasonable?
Oh, it's 100. I see.
Okay.
Yeah. And is that for each time you do it as well?
You better hope not.
Totally.
All right. These are the hiking related questions in the hiking poll. Question number 1, start out easy. Trekking poles or no trekking poles?
Generally, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let me note that down here.
Grand Canyon, yes. Like, it's deep as shit, but generally, no.
Okay. Now, KB, this is not a rapid fire instant response. I like to hear the explanation behind the answer. Okay. It helps me with my algorithm in coming up with your score.
Okay. I think the no reason would be that my hands like moving around. I also like moving in terrain. I think the reason I don't like trekking poles is the places that I like to backpack are places that I can't take a mountain bike, and so they're generally like more scrambly or require like a hand here and there or have really uneven grounds, and I'm not skilled enough with the trekking poles for them to not feel clumsy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 2, when you're hiking, what's on your feet? Boots or
trail runners?
And do you have a specific brand that you prefer, and why trail runners and not boots?
The reason not boots is, and I haven't worn boots since my dad put me in boots when I was 16 for a backpacking trip in Maine, right? I believe a couple reasons. I believe like having your ankle free helps actually build those muscles for having like whole body stability. I think that for me personally, and with former students, it's been a trend as well that like foot care is a lot more easy to just have less friction, a shoe that breathes better. I think that when the shoes get wet, it's easier to just have a sneaker type fabric rather than a big funky boot. And I think that you actually have better awareness of where your feet are because there's less clunk between the sole of your actual foot and the ground. All that said, I haven't walked across the country, but it seems like people like to wear trail runners. And then for me, I go back and forth generally between trail runners and runnable approach shoe, and that kind of just depends on the sole. If I want more of a sticky sole for traveling more on rock, then I use the more like La Sportiva. La Sportiva makes some really light, like meshy approach shoes that you could run in. And then I also like the Ultra Superiors. And when I do run in those and backpack in those. So.
Got it. I love that you cited foot awareness.
Oh, good.
Level of foot awareness. That's a good one.
So those are some points for sanity, I'm guessing.
Not quite, but I liked it.
Okay.
All right. Question number 3. When it comes to your shelter out there, tent, tarp, hammock, bivvy, or hey, let's just cowboy camp?
Okay, let's say we'll start with never a hammock. Really weird body position there. And you need trees.
They have not invented a trekking pole hammock yet that I'm aware of.
Yeah, thank goodness. And then the next answers, there's no one blanket answer, and that is because it is like climate dependent. It goes back to that like kit being light and appropriate for what you're doing. Like my favorite is to just bivvy and cowboy camp. I don't do that if there's like a likelihood of significant precipitation, because ultimately back to the sleeping bag thing, you're just not going to sleep if you're just sleeping out and getting poured on. And I don't carry a bivvy with a hoop and things. I just carry a sack. But like in the Southwest, it's amazing because you get to see amazing stars, and snakes and scorpions are not as big of a deal as people think they are as far as sleeping goes. The next option would, and again, depending on what there are for trees and what wind situation might look like, either a tarp or like a mid-style shelter that would involve one pole and some either rocks or stakes, but bodiless, floorless, that. And then beyond that, I really only take a tent in winter environments like full snow, winter camping. And then I went to Australia, and that's where the snakes and spiders and bugs are more of a problem. And everyone was like, you need to be in a tent. You have to have a zipper to block things out. Okay, so I brought a tent. But otherwise, I don't.
Yeah, I think like 8 of the 10 deadliest snakes in the world live in Australia, and the size of their spiders is just freakishly large.
Yeah, I was glad to have a tent there. But I don't, and I should also add the disclaimer, I don't do much in the Northeast or Midwest or like places that are super buggy, but I think there's a great case for a tent body with mesh to, again, just be able to sleep so that you're not getting eaten by midges or mosquitoes all the time. But
Great.
Yeah, Intermountain West, all the air.
All right. Question number 4. When it comes to sleeping, do you have a sleeping bag or quilt?
I use a sleeping bag. I have used an elephant's foot with a down jacket quite a bit, but that would just be like, what is that? Should I explain that?
Yeah, what's an elephant's foot? I swear that's the first time I've ever heard that term.
Oh, funny.
Other than the usual term, like it belonging to an elephant. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't involve killing elephants. People shouldn't be doing that. An elephant's foot is just like a sleeping bag that comes up to your waist or your belly button. And so it would it would pair with a down jacket. And it's, in my mind, it's like a quilt because it's more minimal than a sleeping bag, but it actually has the tube shape of a sleeping bag. And so you actually have that confined warmth, insulative quality of that. But you need the down jacket to go with it to make it complete. And a lot of them, like the one I have, has a little windbreaker, like the Patagonia Houdini jacket. It's that material that's sewn into the elephant's foot that you can pull up over you. So
got it. Now I'm a little nervous if I go onto Amazon and I type in elephant's foot. I'm worried about what might come up.
Yeah, you might need to add like alpine climbing or something like that.
All right. Question number 5. When it comes to food out there, you bring a stove? Do you cold soak or do you go stoveless?
I don't cold soak. I've tried that and just haven't been super psyched on it. Generally, I bring a stove, and that's mostly because I love coffee. And then I'm like, well, if I'm bringing a stove, I might as well make hot water for dinner as well. I have done, for us, a long bikepacking trip is the Great Divide mountain bike route, which was Canada, Mexico, and I've ridden that without a stove. And that is its own fun experience. But I generally prefer a light stove. And if we want to talk about stoves, I like both alcohol stoves and like the more pocket rocket style. And I think it just generally depends on fuel availability and what I'm trying to do.
We haven't done any kind of discussion. I'm trying to think back on previous episodes. I don't think we've done much of a discussion on the difference between stoves out there. And you just mentioned natural alcohol versus canister. Do you care to explain the difference between those two for our novice listeners out there who are maybe getting into outdoor adventure life?
Yeah, totally. The kind of standard camp stoves that are sold as like backpacking stoves and bikepacking stoves out there are generally canister stoves in North America, and so they run on isobutane. And the cool thing, like they can be really small, like fit smaller than a fist. And they generally boil water super fast, or really fuel efficient in above freezing conditions. And yeah, I think the like efficiency and like ease of use is a pro. They're just really easy and quick. You get a boil within 3 minutes, if that. And so the challenge with them is that isobutane canisters are one size. So as you use fuel, the canister doesn't get any smaller. And then you have this canister that's they're somewhat challenging to monitor the quantity of fuel you have because they're dark. They're not see-through.
Opaque. They're opaque.
That would be the word. Thank you. I was like, what is that?
The general method for determining how much fuel is left, you pick up the can and you shake it.
Totally. Yeah, and you're like, is it half full?
What am I hearing? Yeah.
Exactly. And then they also, especially on these longer trips where you'd be resupplying, you need like a gear store to be able to buy them. They're harder to find. You're not going to really find them at most hardware stores or at grocery stores or at pharmacies. And then the other challenge with it is that you can't fly with them. And so if you're traveling internationally, then fuel becomes a whole nother issue. And they're even less common of a fuel in outdoor stores in a lot of other countries. And so then the alcohol stove, and Doc, you're probably gonna have to correct me on the exact type of alcohol it is, but it's basically just like pure alcohol, like 98% or something higher. It's like jet fuel is the best. And you can buy alcohol stoves, like the one I use is a Trangia, and it's really simple, very durable. There's nothing really to break unless you like smashed it with a hammer, which hopefully you're not doing that to your stove. You just pour the fuel in, and then there's like a little chamber, and you light it, and it just simmers. And they take longer to boil. It's like a less strong flame because it's not really pressurized in the same way as the isobutane. But the cool thing is that you just pour in, depending on the size of the stove, you have a few ounces of fuel that you can burn, and that's enough for a boil or two. And then you pack it away, and you can store your fuel in like a Gatorade bottle or anything that is basically going to seal and not leak, and you're not actually accidentally going to drink out of it.
That's right. Don't make that mistake.
Yeah, do not, because it is clear. Alcohol is just clear, so it could look like water.
And Kait, while you were explaining that, I used the power of the Google and looked up. It's denatured alcohol, which is basically ethanol that has some additives in it to make it poisonous, bad tasting, foul smelling, or nauseating to discourage recreational consumption. But you shouldn't make that mistake of drinking it by accident.
Totally. But the cool thing with it is you can go into a hardware store, just buy denatured alcohol. You can go into a pharmacy in other countries, and you can buy like the highest level of alcohol in their pharmacy. And it might not burn as well, but it burns. And you generally can buy it in pretty reasonable quantities, like a liter or less. And so it's really convenient for these really long trips that resupply in smaller communities or international. And the main thing with the alcohol stoves is that it's just that slower cook time. And at least in my experience, like not cooking directly on the stove and just boiling water and having instant meals is great. But they're awesome. They're so simple, and they're really small. So,
KB, that was a very thorough discussion of the different types of stoves out there. You just got a couple of points back, so thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Question number 6, I believe, is life better above or below the tree line? And is that denatured alcohol you're drinking out of that jar there?
I'm drinking water with a little bit of electrolytes.
Okay.
Above tree line. Yeah. I love the Alpine.
Funny enough, that is the correct answer, but you lose points because you're a little bit crazy to say that, right?
Yeah. I know.
All right. Question number 7, last question. What's more important out there, pack weight or luxury items?
I think pack weight. My idea of luxury items are like that trucker hat. Yeah, I think pack weight.
So are you one of those people that cuts the excess straps off of your bag?
I would do that, but partly more because I really don't like dangly things. I want it to be svelte.
Only stud earrings then, right?
Well, that's different. That's not
okay. Got it.
like sometimes some flair. Yeah, I would say I'm not as hardcore about the weight thing as everyone, but yeah, I've cut my toothbrush in half and
That was my next question. Beat me to it.
but like I don't have to. And I think I think it is a fine line. Like I was talking about the importance of a sleeping bag that is warm and functional. Like I want my kit to be serving what I'm trying to do, not just to weigh nothing.
Got it. All right. That concludes the hiking poll. KB, I need you to stand by because this former English teacher is now going to do some math. We're going to put your answers through the hiker trash radio algorithm. I got to carry the 4. We're going to divide by pi, and multiply that by root 5. And we're going to make a slight adjustment for your abnormally high level of foot awareness. And I come up with a score of 47.
Okay, great. Just below 50.
Just south of the midline. That's right.
Room to improve in either direction.
And it's funny you say that because as we continue the interview tonight, that score has a chance to fluctuate up or down, depending on how it goes.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Are you satisfied with that score?
Yeah, given that I don't actually know what the actual goal is for the score, that sounds great. In the middle.
South of the middle. All right. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, let's back up a little bit. We'd love to hear about your background growing up, what kinds of sports and hobbies you played as a kid, and how did you get involved in the biking cult?
Okay. So all of that in one go.
All of that. That's just one question. Great. Yeah.
Cool. As a kid, I spent a lot of time outside. My family was into day hiking, the more clean version, less smelly.
That's right. Good smelling day hikers out there.
Canoeing. I'm from the Northeast, so it was a lot of Maine, New Hampshire type, a lot of below tree line. There isn't much above tree line, a little bit. And I grew up riding horses as well, which may not seem this way, but at least in the Northeast, riding horses was one way to move through a landscape and be outside and connect with the natural world. And there was like the trail riding element of that was my favorite part of it. And I think that's what kept me in it. And skiing was also a big part of our life. And then I went when I was 17, I graduated from high school early, mostly not because I was exceptionally smart, but I was motivated enough to get out of high school and figured out how to just graduate with everything I needed. And I had a year off, which I was training horses, and I went on a Knowles Patagonia mountaineering course as a 17-year-old down in Chile with Patagonia.
Now, KB, if you're going to try and tell me that you graduated early because of your exceptional intelligence, I was going to just say, just point out that's counterintuitive to a score of 47 on the hiking poll.
But just motivated to do something different was that's the reason. And so I did that, and that was like, at that point I'd been on some overnight backpacking trips and overnight canoe trips, but that was my first like true wilderness month-long experience. And that just completely, in retrospect, as cheesy it is, I'm like, I think that probably changed my life because I got to see this wild landscape that was being impacted by climate and got to live with my Knowles instructors were the ultimate dirtbags that were teaching mountaineering courses to other students and living out of their van or duffel bag. And a lot of it just really spoke to me. And so I ended up going to the University of Vermont, focusing on the outdoor recreation program that they had. And then that transitioned into transferring to a small college in Arizona called Prescott College, which might be the center of the universe for college student dirtbags, and majoring in outdoor leadership. And I started working for Outward Bound and then Knowles. And so at that point, I was one of those people living out of my truck in my backpack and going from field course to field course, and then finding public lands to camp and recreate on in between, which at the time was mostly climbing and trail running in as far as my free time went. And at some point after I had graduated and I was just working full time in the field, I broke my ankle climbing, as climbers do. Very common, especially bouldering. And one of the first things I was allowed to do outside after this surgery was to ride a bike. And so I was like, all right, I'll ride a bike then, because I'm not going to be able to climb for a long time. It doesn't seem like running is in the immediate future. And so I got on a bike, and then pretty quickly I realized, I was like, oh, if I just brought my light overnight kit that I would bring backpacking on my bike, then I could take my bike on multiple days and I could go a lot further than I can go on foot. And so I did that. I literally packed the time I had a Wild Things and an Ista. That was 50 liters. And so I packed that as light as I could, and I put it on my back, and I rode my mountain bike on the Kokopelli Trail. Which, first of all, if you're listening and you've never been bike packing, do not just carry your overnight backpack on your bike. Your hands and your ass will be so mad. And you'll probably feel really top heavy. And now in 2023, there are way better ways to do this. And there were better ways in 2011. I didn't know about them. Because at the time I just lived in my own world. I didn't have a smartphone, and I could just make up a new genre of an activity, but it turns out other people were doing it too. And so but that was pretty addicting, because I was like, I just rode 130 miles in 2.5 days. That's farther than like I would walk. And my boyfriend at the time had wanted to ride the Great Divide mountain bike route, and I was like, sure, that sounds great. I can do that. So we got the proper bags and rode from Mexico to Canada on that route, taking a month. And yeah, we didn't bring stove, and we must have brought a shelter. I feel like we didn't. We must have had a tarp. I just don't think we ever set it up. And that turned into just finding a way of moving in across the landscape that really suited my personality and my body. I'd always struggled, like my knees and hips would struggle whenever I tried to run more than 30 miles. And it was different than what I was doing for work, and so it felt like a really exciting thing to be doing with my off time. And that led to bikepacking around the world and founding a nonprofit, and then having a job as a professional athlete, as a mountain biker and bikepacker. So That's the super accelerated version, but that's what has happened in the last 20 years.
In a nutshell, right there.
Yep.
And do you have any siblings, Kait?
Yeah, I have a brother.
Is he also involved in the outdoor industry?
Yeah, he is also a whitewater kayaker, so less sane, and skis and mountain bikes and fly fishes. Yeah, he's into that stuff.
Got it. Now, I always find it very intriguing how the course of our lives hinge on very specific random moments sometimes. Ooh. And if not for those moments, you could be in a completely different place. I could be in a very different place. But for this one thing that happened that kind of shifted our trajectory, that's just fascinating.
Yeah, you can't plan for it. It's not like you're like, okay, I'm going to break my ankle and then find a different sport.
That's right.
You're like, I'm going to meet this person who just happens to introduce me to this other way of doing things, and this other person who then will give me this other opportunity. It's crazy.
Yep. I was talking to a guy who was on his way to being a world-class triathlete, and he was a teacher, and he was late for a board meeting he was supposed to present at, and got into a single vehicle car accident where he went through the windshield and ended up doing enough damage to his knee that was not a possibility anymore. And so he became a peak bagger, and then quickly, I'm not sure if he's the fastest to collect 100 FKTs, but he's got more than 100 FKTs under his belt now. Just weird, random stuff that happens.
Totally.
Yep.
That's crazy.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from the sponsors, pay some bills, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more of the nitty-gritty of your past and more recent adventures. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're talking to Kait Boyle, aka KB Dot.
Yeah.
And just heard some great information in the first segment. I want to come back to one piece you didn't really gloss over, but I want a little more information. What do you do as a field instructor at a college? What kinds of activities are you doing out there in the field?
Yeah, so in the college setting, it was teaching other college students who are learning how to become field instructors the leadership and educational and technical skills that they needed to be effective outdoor educators in their future. When you're actually in the role of a field instructor in the outdoor education role for students in a format like NOLS or Outward Bound, your role is to facilitate a leadership building character building experience that ideally gives people that sort of life experience that connects them to the natural world, builds their own confidence, helps them develop more self-awareness, just a lot of very transferable life skills into whatever it is they go on to next, which it could be anything from something related to the outdoors to like being a banker. Like the skills that we teach are lifelong human skills that serve people well beyond that course. And the model is that you travel as a small group, small being like anywhere from 6 to 15 people in an expeditionary setting. And so you leave the front country and you go and you are moving in a self-sufficient way in whatever medium that is, whether it's whitewater rafting or backcountry skiing or backpacking or climbing. And through working towards that shared goal of the expedition, you're working as a team to overcome problems and to practice leadership and to develop all the skills necessary to achieve that goal.
I now regret some of my life choices. I should have been a field instructor.
You still can.
It's not too late?
No, not too late. It's common for field instructors to be younger because it's generally lower paying and it's not super conducive to like the standard modern life of sleeping in your own bed every night, spending every day with your partner. But it is, I think, the best field instructors are those with a lot of life experience. And I think it's a sweet way to spend a lot of time in the outdoors because you get to just share all these skills in incredible places with other people.
KB, did you just call me old?
No, I said that there's a lot of time in your future to make a decision.
Sounded like you said I had a lot of life experience.
More than a 20-year-old.
A lot more than a 20-year-old. All right. Fantastic. Before we started tonight, we exchanged some notes as to what we may talk about. And one of the things that I'm not sure you gave me a lot of explanation in the notes on this. And so I'm really interested to hear about what I have in my notes is just the car accident. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think, okay, the thing to frame the car accident around is a little bit of background about what was going on in my life right beforehand. So I think a car accident can be serious regardless. And the context for why my car accident has been significant in my life and through being able to share about it with my communities, I know it's been impactful for other people, was that so in 2018, I had quit my job as a field instructor and decided that I was going to try to make it as a professional athlete that was dedicated to showing the world that women were as capable as men in endurance sports, that you're unlimited, and to advocate for the places that we ride through, the landscapes that don't have a voice. And so I went out to the 24 Hours of Old Pueblo in February down in Arizona, which is a lap race. It's 16 miles, and the goal is to do as many laps on your mountain bike as you can in 24 hours. And I did 18, which turned out to be around 300 miles and set a new course record for women. And generally that amount of laps it's pretty much always would be on the podium with the men. And in some years that could win the men's race. And so that felt good. And that earned me an invitation to the 24-Hour World Championships as well. But first I had this other goal, and that was to race and set a course record on the Arizona Trail 300. And so there's a kind of underground mountain bike race on the Arizona Trail, same trail that the hikers hike, except we have to detour around the wilderness areas. And there's a race for the first 300 miles. It ends at Picket Post, and then there's a race across the whole state. And as someone who likes sleep, I'm not really into the week plus long races that Lael does, because I'd rather just not sleep for a night or two and then be done than sleep for 2 hours or 3 hours a night for a week or two. That sounds horrible to me. That's negative 75 points on the insanity score.
I like it. You were going to apply the hiking pole to all facets of your life. People you come in contact with, you're going to be scoring them without their knowledge. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know what just riding through 2 nights without sleeping would equate to, but that's what I did for the Arizona Trail 300. And I finished in 51 hours, technically 50 hours and 50 minutes ish. And that at the time was the 4th fastest ride ever by anyone. There had been 3 men who had done it around 46 to 48 hours, and then there's my time. And I took 11 hours off the women's record.
Wow.
Who was also a very accomplished female bike pack racer. And so I was like on my mission. I was like, okay, this is happening. I am proving to people that you're unlimited and women can race with the best men in the world in these like ultra endurance formats, where there's a lot more than like just your physical ability, because for especially the Arizona Trail race, like that's self-supported. Like you start and no one can bring you water, no one can bring you food, you just resupply on your own. If you have a mechanical, you fix it, all that. You carry your own gear. And so then in October, I went to the 24-hour World Championships in Scotland, and I went as I wouldn't say underdog, but people weren't expecting me to do particularly well, I think. I hadn't raced in that environment before. Scotland's basically the opposite of Arizona. And hadn't been to that series before. And so it started raining like an hour before the race, and it rained for all the way up until an hour after the race. And it was just torrential. And it was in the Scottish Highlands. And so we'd climb up above tree line. It would just be like raining really hard sideways, and we'd descend back down into the really wet woods, and I'd go through my pit. These are supported races, and just resupply. And I remember thinking like, this could suck, but actually this is way easier than taking care of 12 other students in this weather, because I just have to get myself around this lap, and then I go back and I get to have a shot of espresso and some hot soup and change my shoes and then keep going. And I won that race. And so I became the 24-hour world champion, and then
hang on, KB. Let's not gloss over this. That's so impressive. Congratulations. What an accomplishment. How big was the course that you rode around for 24 hours?
If I remember right, I think that one was about 8 miles, maybe 10, but it had a lot more climbing. And so it was taking about an hour, a little over an hour. So it actually had a similar time for each lap as the old Pueblo course. It was just a much slower course. It was a lot more technical, which was awesome because it's engaging, and it's mountain biking. It should be hard.
Right. And doing it for 24 hours, that is pretty formidable. Yeah. With any formidable challenge in our lives, I think the best way to approach it is to break it into smaller, achievable chunks. Is that how you approach it? You just taking it one lap at a time, or one pit lap at a time? How does that work?
Yeah, you just break it down. And so for each race, I would break it down a bit by bit. You don't want there to be too many, right? Because otherwise suddenly you're like, am I on chunk number 20? Or is it 23? Because then suddenly that cues in that sense of time piece. And so the goal with breaking it down is to just give yourself something that you can focus on. And then you check that off and you move on to the next one. So that you're not ever thinking, wow, the finish line is 300 miles away. No one will get there at least I won't get there if that's the way you approach it. So I tend to break it down by something that'll be around the 2 or 3 hour realm. And so that might be like marked by when I switch bikes, or marked by when I'm refilling on food, or marked by it's been 2 laps or 3 laps. And that's like that chapter of that race. And then you move on to the next one. Or sometimes it's with the transition between day and night. You're like, okay, it's going sunset is this time. So that's the end of a chapter. And now you're starting into the first night chapter. But yeah, that is it's good insight. And it's very true. That's like a key strategy for getting through those.
And I also like that your frame of mind in an endurance contest like that is so important, right?
Mhm.
You could have gone into it and said, "Oh, it's pouring. This is going to be miserable. This is going to suck," and it just does, because that's what you're expecting. But
Totally.
instead, you framed it as, at least I don't have 15 people I have to look after in this kind
Yeah.
of weather. It's just me, and I'm just riding a bike. Let's make the best of it here. You had a more positive outlook, and that paid off.
Yeah, and this, I'm not going to give it away fully because this ties into that hiking hack, but
Oh, be careful.
for this, I'm not
Careful.
giving it away. But for this event, I had a mantra, and it was, wet isn't a mindset, but happiness is. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. Okay. Now, I assume this is all leading up to the car accident.
Oh,
We're still in the context part, right?
yeah.
Got
Context
it.
part. That's the end of October. The end of the year, very soon. It's for cyclists generally like a time to take it easy, recover, like we take a off season, the holidays come, and then you start to like work towards your goals for the next year. And I was doing that, and in this context of like I quit my job to race my bike and be a backcountry mountain biker. I also needed to like still piece together some things, and I had a couple winter like backcountry ski Knowles courses lined up for the winter because that was an easy time to just not be on my bike and go be in the field. And that first one was starting at the end of December, and that was in the Tetons, and so I was spending Christmas in the Tetons because I had to start work 2 days later. And on Christmas Eve, I was driving from Driggs, Idaho, south toward Victor, Idaho, which is only 8 miles down a very straight, very flat, classic Idaho Valley road. Like nothing varies from the straightness and the flatness of this road. And it had been sleeting and then cooled off a little bit. It should have been snowing, but it was sleeting, cooled off. And so there wasn't snow on the road, but turns out there was black ice. And I was driving along, and my boyfriend.
So you're driving. You're not biking. You're driving.
Yeah, I'm driving my
Okay, got it.
little Tacoma, and my boyfriend Will was on the phone on the speaker thing and was talking to him. He was having Christmas in Memphis. And all of a sudden, just like in this straight line, my rear wheels just slid and went sideways, and I started just like fishtailing at like 45 miles an hour on this highway. And I was very much like in the other lane. And the oncoming car swerved into my lane to try to avoid me as I'm coming straight at them. And then my car just slid completely out of control back into the other lane. In mid spin, they T-boned me going about 55 miles an hour in my driver's side door. And somehow I never lost consciousness. And I came to a stop and opened my eyes and felt this burning sensation in my pelvis, and I couldn't feel my legs. And so I was like, holy shit, I could be paralyzed. Like, I can't feel my legs. And in that moment, I thought back to all the ultra endurance racing mindset stuff, and I was like, I have two choices right now, and that's to either freak out because I might never walk and bike again, or it's to just stay calm and breathe. And that's what I did. And slowly, and now like over the span of hours, I'm like stuck in my car. The paramedic like broke through the window and got into the car with me and hooked me up to morphine. And long story short, I ended up in the ICU that night. They did immediate emergency surgery because I had ruptured my bladder. And so they thought they had to do a surgery on it. Turns out they didn't, but they did pull out every single organ out of my stomach to check it. They were very pleased. They're like, "Oh, everything's in good shape." I was like, "All right."
They pulled it out, held it up to the light, looked at it.
Yeah, seriously.
Said looks good. Yikes.
Yeah. So then in the morning, I learned on Christmas morning, my parents arrived from New Hampshire. Will flew back from Memphis. I had a friend had shepherded me through this whole thing. She had arrived on the car accident scene. Because Will thought I was dead. That's the other thing is everyone should remember is he had been on the phone, he heard this crash and then sirens. And he, for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, didn't know if I was alive. And so I learned on Christmas morning that I had quadruple fractured my pelvis. So your pelvis is a ring, and I had broken it in 4 places. And I'd broken my sacrum and it was either my tibia or my fibula, my leg. But that was pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. And because of the ruptured bladder, surgery was like pretty challenging because they were worried about bone infection. And so I ended up maybe a week later, still in the hospital. I got surgery to stabilize my pelvis, and I got an external fixator, which if you've never seen one, you should Google it. It's crazy, but you basically get like a towel rack screwed into your hip bones to like clamp your pelvis externally in place. I'll include pictures of mine in these photos I'll send you after this, but it was crazy. And the biggest gift of that day was my surgeon was like, or of Christmas Day was my to-be surgeon was like, all right, you can have a full recovery. And I was like, 24-hour racing? That's what I do. I want to ride my bike all day for multiple days. And he was like, he seemed to think that was maybe crazy, but he was like, I think you'll be able to do that.
You see the look on his face. Yeah, that's a bit odd, but if that's
like,
the thing, if that's your thing.
Like, no one's ever asked him if you can do that after you break your pelvis, but he was like, I don't see why not. And so, yeah, that started down this whole road of recovering from that, which is just a lot more than bones healing. It's like healing from a super traumatic injury. And I had an incredible recovery. I was back on my bike within 12 weeks, maybe 16, something like that.
Was it tough? Was it tough riding with that towel rack bolted in?
Yeah, so I got, and I actually think this is one of the reasons my recovery was so successful was I learned how to get on from my wheelchair onto my bike on a trainer with the X-Fix. And it wasn't super comfortable, but I was able to move my legs. And being in a X-Fix, you can only sit or lay down on your back. Like you can't lay on your side, you can't lay on your stomach, and you definitely can't walk. And so I think actually in retrospect, even though no one was like, oh, you should get on your bike, I was like, I have to move. And I think that actually that like circulation was one of the things that really helped the recovery. So yeah, long story short, I now have I have a few sacrums. So I have two pretty long, like 6 to 8 inch screws through my sacrum, which has impacted my like post-car accident career, but I've since retired from ultra endurance racing, mostly because I want to be able to have a healthy body that can still backpack and ski and ride my bike when I'm in my 70s with Will, because we're married now.
I was waiting to see how that turned out. I wanted to ask, hey, is the guy sitting on the other side of the closet door, is that Will?
Yeah,
tell me that's Will.
It is. Yep. So yeah, and I think like anything where, earlier you talked about how like just a single thing can really change things. And a lot of the times we like to celebrate the things that they're like, this thing changed, then my life changed, and it was amazing. And I think for me, over the course of over 4 years, that car accident has been this thing that like continues to like slightly redirect my course in a way that prior to that car accident was not what I was envisioning for my life. I was envisioning setting overall records, and I think in that recovery and now realizing like how I am not just limited by my body, but like how I want to take care of it. Like I'm focused on other things that are more important to me now.
So you were a climber and you broke your ankle and shifted direction to long distance endurance events. And then the car accident comes and that shifts you a little bit more to now backcountry mountain biker.
Yes. And I would like for that trend to end. I don't want to break more bones to have life directions changing. But yeah, like in that recovery, when your body is in a place that it wasn't before. And for me, when I was faced with that reality of knowing I might not ever be in the same physical place that I was, or even mental, I might not ever want to put myself intentionally into that level of pain of ultra racing because I've already been through a lot. And on one hand, the pain of traumatic injury reframes what is actually painful. And then on the other hand, sometimes you're like, life is too short to like, I just want to be in awe and have a lot of fun, have that joy piece. And so what continued to come back to me from that moment in the car accident where I was sitting in the car and wondering if I was paralyzed was just like, okay, if I'm not paralyzed, And even if I am, I'll find a different way to do this. But if I'm not paralyzed, what I want to do with my able body is to be in these amazing places that are ultimately the reason that I ride my bike, the reason that I walk and hike and ski and used to climb, and to try to have my career have a positive impact on those places. And so that's what's led to being on the Protect Our Winners Athlete Alliance and trying to use the platform I have and the resources and opportunities I have to have bike-oriented projects that are also serving this bigger purpose of trying to harness like the outdoor state, all you people who squirrel suit fly and whitewater kayak and ski and thru hike, to use the power that you have in a vote or in engaging in your communities to have political action for climate advocacy. And then with the trails piece, there's just no way around that for me. And I don't know if I ever really clarified this, but I will ride on the road, but I'd so much rather ride on trail because that's the place. That's how you get into the mountains. That's how I get to be above tree line. And that's where I get to feel that flow state and that most true connection of myself to the earth that I'm moving through. And so the trail advocacy piece is like working with the nonprofits in my communities or on trails that have been hugely impactful in my life, like the Arizona Trail, knowing that it's not just me who is benefiting from those experiences, but it can be anyone who sets foot or horse or bike or whatever else, maybe moto, on that trail, and they get to have their path. And that could be for them that thing that turns into a different direction in their life, or an aha moment, or just like a really meaningful day with a friend, or a moment where you're like, oh wow, like I am unlimited. And so I've been trying to spend a lot more of my time trying to make sure that those like backcountry trails are recognized as valuable, and like our access as mountain bikers is maintained in responsible ways and things like that.
That's absolutely great. Give us a snapshot of backcountry mountain biking in its current format with you.
Yeah. So the snapshot of, I think for everyone, what is the backcountry is very subjective. It depends on your perspective of what is wild and what is far from the trailhead. And so I think for me, what makes backcountry mountain biking backcountry is that it takes you places that are farther from just like that most known, more traveled, more populated locations, like into the places that are less known. It's suddenly feels a bit more adventurous. There's like that uncertainty piece. I think that like uncertainty and like the challenge that comes with that is hugely what shapes the feeling of adventure and like backcountry experiences for me. And that sense of wildness. Like backcountry mountain biking is not purpose built, although that can be fun riding. And it's not like there aren't perfect trail signs at every junction. Like you need to be having that awareness of the landscape and be navigating and like paying attention, like being prepared for whatever elements that you face. And I think it's probably easier, and I think ultra runners would probably disagree because they run really far in a day, but it's probably easier on a bike to have that backcountry experience in a day because you can just inevitably travel farther than on foot. But I think that it's a very shared experience of once you're out there, you're like, oh, I'm out here. And you can definitely get that on foot, just depending on where you're going. I think that's, in a way, for like wilderness advocates, I think that's like what a lot of the appeal is like being able to have that experience. And so with like bikes, we don't get the capital W wilderness experience, but there's a lot of landscape that you can have the lowercase w wilderness experience. Yeah.
The lowercase wilderness experience. Nice. Yeah, we've talked a lot on the podcast about how outdoors is for everybody, inclusivity. And I think it's like a light bulb going off in my head that not just inclusivity for all types of people, but for all types of activities, right? It's implied with the different types of people that I've talked to, but I think to really put a fine point on it, it's not just for thru hikers, it's for bike packers, it's for mountain bikers, squirrel suit flyers. Yeah, a whole lot.
Yeah. And I think that the challenge that we have in land management and in advocacy is just remembering that there is space for everyone. It's just like, how do you create a piece of a pie for everyone where you can have that experience and it not be too impacted by other people's ways of having their experiences. And I think that's where like all different designations come in and yeah. And I think that especially in that post-COVID world, it seems like a lot of outdoor communities are seeing an influx of people, and that brings up a really important conversation, and it can be difficult when we're like used to the places that we know having a certain number of people and then suddenly there are more. So how do you have an opportunity for everyone and also preserve the opportunity for everyone to have the experiences of solitude or quiet or wildness? Because I think for a lot of us, those qualities are like just even the ability to be somewhere that's remote and just have the risk of being remote when they're not being self-service. Like, I think a lot of us value that.
Yes, absolutely. And maintaining that balance of all of those purposes sounds like a fine balancing act.
Totally.
Yeah. KB, what is the next big adventure for you? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, so the next big thing, that's a good question. The big thing this year has been getting married, and my partner and I got to go elope in the Tetons, and we ski traversed across the range, self-supported in the winter, which was pretty awesome. And this summer is just
what every girl dreams about when she's younger. That kind of honeymoon. That's
what
perfect.
every girl dreams about.
That's right.
And for me, summer in the Tetons is really special. It's very short, and I just love it. And so I think that because so much of the year it's under snow, it's not a big adventure, but the adventure that keeps me trying to stay home as I can through the summer is just like wanting to go back to those wild places on my bike that I haven't seen now since September, which is like 9 months. And it's like visiting old friends. But on the more multi-day adventure facet, my teammate is this guy, Kurt Refsnyder, who's also a bike pack racer and former ultra endurance legend guy. And he is bike packing the Continental Divide Trail, the CDT, as you all know it as. And in the bike packing world, the Great Divide mountain bike route is like the CDT version for bike packing, but it's all pretty much dirt road. And so it's inspired by the CDT, but it's not the CDT. It's not single track. And so he's going to ride the CDT with creating as many trail wilderness detours as he can along the way. And there are only 3 other people that we know that are known to have ridden the CDT ever, which is pretty wild. And the cool thing about it is like the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail are close to bikes entirely, even in the non-wilderness sections. And so for us, the CDT is like the one kind of iconic long distance trail that we could have access to, or we do have access to right now, obviously outside of the wilderness areas. And it's long. And so he's riding the whole thing. That'll take him like 3 or 4 months. And so I'm going to ride the Colorado section with him because prior to that car accident, my next goal, like biggest goal for that year, which would have been 2019, was to go race the Colorado Trail race and set an overall record in it, which I believed that I could have done. And that's like letting go of a dream. And I've slowly let go of that dream. And so now this trip feels like a reframing, like just changing the dream. And it's like, now it's to go ride the Continental Divide Trail through the Colorado Rockies with one of my best friends, sleeping at night. And it's going to probably be really hard because it's always hard to ride your bike up 5,000-foot climbs, but I think it'll also be super fun and beautiful. And it's been a while since I did a multi-week trip here in the US. So.
That sounded very poetic, KB. Letting go of dreams and then realizing you don't have to let go of them completely. You can just reframe the dream to a certain degree.
Yeah, because I think that I don't think it has to take a car accident for this to happen, but I think as we grow and evolve, we just outgrow things. what we want to do changes because our values change.
All right. Best of luck on that. That sounds like a whole lot of work, and I can see the fun in your eyes as you talk about it. So best
Yeah,
of
we
luck.
get to ride downhill.
Nice. That's the part I did enjoy. Yeah. Hey, KB, you know where we are right now?
Where?
Hiking hacks.
Hiking hacks. That's right. We're at that point of the episode where you get to share some outdoor adventure wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. What do you have for us?
Okay. One question. Can I have 2 answers?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, great. So the first hiking hack, this is it's very easily applicable to a bike because we have handlebars, which like you inevitably look at a lot or they're within your sight. But I think for hikers or paddlers or squirrel suit flyers or anything, skiers, there are ways around the not having the handlebar thing. But my hiking hack has to do with mindset, which I think that's for people who are into the ultra endurance stuff. It's a huge mental game. That's the thing that takes the most work. At least for me, it was like figuring out the headspace in order to just let time pass and to let go of the uncontrollable and to trust the process and to break it down and all those things. And that's what got me through the car accident, is having developed those skills through ultra racing. And one of the things that I used to keep my kind of head game in the game was mantras written on athletic tape and taped to my handlebars. And it's not like an essay, it's just a mantra, like a couple words in a little phrase. And it's like something that is going to cue you back to like your purpose and your goal and that sense of like happiness and gratitude. And one that has stuck with me is just, I get to. Because a lot of the times we're like, oh my God, I have to do this. Or like, why am I here? And it's actually, I chose to do this. No one has ever made me start a race. And then with the like healing from a traumatic car accident that doctors really like to remind me could have killed me, it's not, oh my God, I am broken and I have to grow all these bones back and be in a wheelchair. It's, I get to do this. I get to do my PT, take my vitamins, lay on the couch and rest to recover. And I think that mindset of I get to is applicable to all sorts of challenges in life, whether they're on the trail or something that the universe threw at you. But I think that taping them somewhere that is visible, and that could be like on your mirror in your bathroom or on your trekking pole if you're a trekking pole person, on the front of your kayak, on your steering wheel. Maybe not, you should look at the road, but somewhere like that, on the back of your phone. Those can just be a huge resource in just bringing us back. Because like I think we all, at least, I definitely go into the negative headspaces or can get bogged down by the thought patterns. But we can actually rewire our brains to think about things in a different light.
KB,
so that's the first one. Yeah.
KB, you and I are kindred spirits because I use that whole we get to with my kids, raising my kids.
Oh,
We have to do, no, we get to do this. We get to do
they're
this.
so lucky to have you.
Trying to reframe it like that. And you know where I'm putting my tape with my mantra? I'm going to put it on, I'm going to tape it onto the back of Chopper's hairy calves when we're out there hiking. Because that's what I'm looking at most often is we're hiking right next to each other. I'm staring down at his calves because he's just looking faster than I am. So
You could get temporary tattoos made
nice.
just for him.
Nice.
Shave a little spot and be like, there it is.
Yes.
Or
When I woke up this morning, I never dreamed that I'd be having a conversation about shaving Chopper's calves. This is awesome.
Yeah. Or I don't know if y'all wear tall socks and through hiking. We were mountain biking, but like you get tall socks printed with them.
Nice.
Great. And then the next one is just a little plug. In 2017, my teammate Kurt and I founded Bikepacking Roots, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that is the first or nonprofit dedicated to bikepacking. And our goal is to lower the barriers to bikepacking and advocate for the landscapes that we ride through. And just today, and this was not planned with this podcast, it's very coincidental, but just today we released the second edition of the Bikepackers Guide, which we wrote back in 2014 as a project for a sponsor at the time. And now this time around, I just wrote this second edition of a guide to bikepacking for bikepacking routes. And in it is the goal of that book is to provide all the bikepacking hacks. And so whether you're a cyclist with zero backcountry overnight multi-day travel, or you're a thru hiker who wants to now make that transition like I did into bikepacking, that little guidebook is just a resource for learning a lot of the things we learned the hard way, the easier way. So
that's great. Congratulations on that. Just today.
Yeah, just today.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So there you have it. We are just about done here. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with KB. Want to thank her for joining us this week. Kait, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures, including the Colorado Trail?
Yeah, so on social media, I'm on Instagram. It's Kait, Kait.Boyle, Boyle. And I post, share things. Sometimes I take short breaks from it because I think it's good for mental health. And I have a newsletter where I go deeper into just things in my life and projects I'm working on, and more of the philosophical stuff that Instagram format just doesn't have as much room for. And so that newsletter is available on my website, and the website is imkait.com.
I can remember that. Very good.
Yeah. No
All right.
So,
remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have questions or comments that you want to share with me, you can send it to me at hikertrashradio@gmail.com.
Off the beaten path.
Now, unfortunately, we can't always be on the trail. And when we're not, we need to find a way to get our adventure fixed. KB, I'm going to ask you to share some outdoor adventure media with our listeners to help them get by. This can be a book or a movie or a documentary. We call this segment Off the Beaten Path. Any recommendations?
the book that I just read and finished last week that really stood out and I think could resonate with a lot of folks on this is called Good for a Girl. And it's called by Lauren Fleshman, who is a U.S. national level track runner. And it was just a really inspiring and kind of personal autobiography, but also a call to action for just like how women are treated in sports and how the whole world of sports brings women up.
Got it. Great recommendation.
Thanks.
Have we not asked you?
And before we wrap things up, just one more segment for you called What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Us About? What do we miss tonight?
The only thing we missed is Hank. So Hank is my
Hey.
dog. And he is a very good boy. He has a little 3.5-year-old cattle dog mutt. Technically, he's Australian cattle, according to a DNA test, he's Australian cattle dog, then pit bull, then Australian shepherd, and then chow, and then German shepherd, border collie, and pug.
Got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, but he is an amazing little trail dog and just like one of the biggest joys of my life. And I have a project in the works that will hopefully get to share with the world, just like the joy that a 4-legged furry friend can bring to life when there can be some heavy things in the world. And whether it's overcoming a car accident or thinking about human rights or politics or like climate, or even just like our day-to-day challenges of, I got in a fight with my partner, but like the dog, and just being like, okay, I'm gonna go get on my bike for Hank, and then seeing how happy he is, it's just brings so much joy to my life.
Yeah, I've heard that the dog is the only creature on the planet that loves you more than it loves itself, which that just tugs at me.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Amazing.
All right, we are finished. Thank you for coming on the podcast, KB. We wish you the very best in these upcoming adventures. And we hope that you've had such a good experience tonight that you'll agree to come back and share some more stories in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. And I'm excited to now go back, binge listening to everything that's been on here.
Nice. As we close up today, do you have any shout outs to friends and family? Anybody sitting on the opposite side of that door, or family, or anybody else?
Will absolutely deserves all the thanks for supporting the level of whatever my score for insanity. Is that the word? Sanity score?
Sanity scale, 47.
Yeah, so he deserves all the love for supporting that. And I think the other piece of this is that for any professional athlete, we just have a lot of brands that have people behind them. They're like more than just a logo, who believe in my mission and give me the opportunity to work on fulfilling it in my life. And I'm so grateful for them.
All right. Hey, do you think Will would come on the podcast?
Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Share some kayaking stories?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that would be.
Don't let him listen to this, but I promise I give him a lower score than 47.
Okay, sounds good.
It'll be our secret. Nobody else heard
Okay.
that. Okay.
Excellent. And he'll be like, I got a 46. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
All right. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you've been riding all day with a towel rack holding your pelvis together. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.